How am I doing?
You're looking great.
No, and also, I'm looking good. Am I making depression sexy yet?
Of course. I mean, you already did.
Thank you. Okay, so today we're doing intimate relationships. It's an exploration of all the complexities that I can think of that are related to myself having a history of trauma. There's nothing definitive that I'm saying here. Like the rest of the videos, it's an exploration. I'm not trying to come up with anything academic here. So the area of relationships, when I think about the history of working on myself and context to therapy, intimate relationships, and that's very different than friends. Intimate relationships are, in my head, I think of it as a category completely different than anything else. And I identify all of that, I boil it down to touch. Where there is touch involved, especially sex, when there is sex involved, whether you are, it's not about how much sex you're having or whatever, but that the possibility is there, or even the fact that at one time we used to have sex, but touch and sexual intimacy open up a whole world that doesn't open up in other situations, at least for me and for most people that I can think of. And in a way, it's the closest, I guess it dissolves boundaries, and that's the tricky bit. It dissolves boundaries. And when I think of babies, when they come out of the mom's tummy, in the beginning, they don't know the difference. We don't know the difference between where we end and where the outside world begins. Because when we're in the womb, we're part of the mom, part of the universe. We don't have the intellect to conceptualize and be aware of this. So this is how I see it, you know. So intimacy and sex is the most vulnerable. I'm just gonna keep on bringing it back to me, so I'm removing it from academia as such, or theorizing about this shit, you know. So for me, sex, you know, and I'm the kind of guy who likes intimacy and sex rather than bang bang and all of that shit, you know, or feeling alpha male, or, you know. To me, intimacy and sex leaves me feeling vulnerable, and that's how it's right for me, rather than, you know, this male accomplishment that I've seen in societies sometimes, you know, I fucked her or all this kind of shit. I don't relate to, I mean, on a primal level, I understand it, evolutionary biology and all of that, I understand it. And people think about sex differently. But I've observed that even the macho guys who talk about sex as a certain way of conquering, and they objectify it, for me it always feels that the underlying desire or wish isn't just sexual pleasure. It's about intimacy and connection, even if when we're not necessarily framing it for ourselves that way. And that's the reason why I think intimate relationships are so tricky. Like, I have a friend only a couple of days ago, he was telling me that he grew up in an environment where it was so difficult from both parents. And in the first relationship where he felt loved for who he is, it ended up being extremely disruptive. It wasn't a scenario of, wow, now I've just found love and it just feels good. No, he was shaken to the core by it. Excuse me. And I think what happens there when you meet true love, or when you meet a, there's no such thing as 100% true love, but when you meet a person who loves you for you, who you are, in a new way that you haven't experienced before, I think it's disruptive because it wakes up the parts in us that we had to freeze, the parts of us that had to adjust to the parents we had and we didn't end up feeling lovable, and we have to contain ourselves and tighten ourselves in order to deal with the world. And when those parts wake up, it's like, wow, I didn't know I could be loved like this. This is new to me. I should have gotten it from my parents. I should have gotten it from the world, but I haven't. And there's a whole lot of grieving that wakes up with that. You become contact of what you didn't have. But none of the stuff happens on a conscious level. So I think that's one of the reasons why it is disruptive. And I'm naming this because on some head level, if you're not told this shit, and most people, nobody tells us this shit in school, man, and when you don't know it, it could be disruptive on so many different levels, especially for the person who's loving you. They're being kind to you, and you're all over the place, And there's a sense, well, it's not supposed to be like this. This is actually good. How come there's all this chaos waking up? There's also all of these conceptualizations in society in general about what love is supposed to be, and how to look at relationships, and there's so many theories, there's so many buzzwords, and how we conceptualize relationships has changed over times. Like 100 years ago, being in a relationship was something far more practical than relating and connecting with another person. Back then, it could have more to do with something practical. You can marry just because you're part of a tribe and you're trying to make peace with another tribe. Sometimes the reasons are political. Sometimes the reasons are very practical. You're a farmer, you own land, you want kids in order to work the land, So I'm just naming that the complexities of relationships have expanded in the last 50 years, and and that's expanded so much in relation to the last thousands of years of how we related to each other. So here comes therapy, and how now we have all these new terminologies of you don't want to be codependent, and you have to figure, what does that mean? Well, we have to be an individual in relationships, and sometimes of all of these new concepts, most of them have good merit in them, and a good invitation to be aware of dynamics in a new way. But like anything else, it can go to another extreme. It's like we're meant to be individuals, not dependent on each other at all. In order to be healthy, you have to love yourself first. And it gets fucking junky after a while, because I think as mammals, we forget sometimes in the field of the mental health and psychology that at the end of the day we are mammals, and there is a healthy amount of dependence and all of that stuff. So I guess I'm naming something here that for me, at least personally, the way I'm framing it, is a huge part of the healing process, And by design, whether you have a history of trauma or not, it is something that is becoming more complex, and it keeps unraveling as we evolve as human beings, Okay, I'm gonna look at my notes, because I've got a lot of notes about this stuff. So, in the last 40 years, what am I now, 57? My first serious relationship was the age of 19. As a teenager, I grew up in Lebanon in a very conservative society in the middle of the Civil War, so I didn't really have any relationships until I moved to Ireland. I didn't have any sexual relationships except with myself before then, which counts. Anyway, look, this is a different, completely different area. But for now, I'm 57, the age of 19, when I moved to Ireland was my first relationship, and I've been thinking about all of this stuff, you know, trying to get into the field of psychology, explore what's healthy, what's not, you know, and being conscious, my relationship with my mother, and relation with, you know, and history of men, and all of this stuff, trying to work through the sexual desires. But one of the really nicest things I've ever come across was from a jazz CD, Ernest Ranglin. I think he's a jazz guitarist from the Caribbean. And maybe this was like 15 years ago or maybe 20, but I was looking at through the booklet, and he's dedicating the, you know, he was thanking his wife in the booklet. And he says something like, to, you know, thanking his wife and thanking her as my mother, my partner, and my daughter. And I was like, whoa, that is some wild shit, you know, like to call her both wife and mom, you know, and it's like, oh, Oedipus complex and psychoanalysis and all of this shit. And he's like, doesn't give a shit about you calling your daughter? What? You know? But that, for me personally, was one of the most natural way of bypassing all this intellectual framing and just acknowledging that your partner is everything to you. Well, that's how it is for him. And that's the kind of thing that I like. And there'll always be individual differences when it comes to this stuff. This is why I'm bringing it back to myself, because there'll be psychologists disagreeing with this, or there will be other guys who's like, no, I actually don't want that. You know, I want an adult to adult relationships. So this all of this I'm discussing remains personal, and I'm just sharing with you what I personally like. And now, one of the most important things for me personally about how to view relationships, you know, I haven't had a lot of relationships. I haven't counted them, but definitely not more than 10 serious relationships in the last 40 years. And a lot, I mean, I haven't had much casual sex, mainly because, I mean, I wanted to, but I'm just not, I'm, you know, cut up that way. But anyway, after finishing my formal education as a psychologist, I ended up expanding beyond mainstream psychology. And I went to this workshop. It was actually Christine Page, who was, I think, a medical doctor, and it was bringing in a lot of spirituality work. But one of the best ways of looking at relationships, she says, when a relationship ends, it doesn't mean it failed. It means that it worked up till then. And that was life-changing for me, you know, because, I think I was married at the time, which, you know, I mean, that ended up really messy divorce and all of that stuff. And I think at that time, you know, I did go into the marriage with the belief of it will last forever and all of that stuff. But it was life-changing, not in relation to how I was viewing the future, but maybe viewing the past. But anyway, I think that's far healthier for me in relation to dealing with the grief of a breakup of a relationship, because the breakup of a relationship for me wakes up so much pain that is not solely coming from the relationship itself. It wakes up old pain. And I think that is a that I can, you know, I try not to generalize, but it's safe to say that this is part of the human experience of relationships, too, when relationships break up in general, it wakes up far more pain than the pain of two adults separating. And framing it that way, that it's not an indication of a failure, although it's always good to reflect what was my part in it as well, instead of just blaming the other person. But I think it's a healthier way of trying to see the positive and not catastrophizing it and not going into the zone, well, I'll never do that again. I will never go out with a person who looks like that or behaves like that. It just takes a lot of the drama out of it. I'm going to look at my notes again. Okay, so looking back at, the relationships I had and what is worth sharing with you today, I kind of see it, when I look back at previous partners, I kind of see that I've had two relationships which went really messy, and in my head I just put them aside. And I'm not going to share anything about them here, but I'm going to just think of two relationships besides my current relationship. I'm going to think of two women I was with, which I look back at them and say, very comfortably say, these are really beautiful people. And there's gold in there in terms of what to share with you in relation to trauma. And the first one that I'm thinking of, there's two things which are really important. One is, well, maybe it's three things. When I first started going out, I'm not going to name her. When I first started going out with her at the age of 20, I actually literally did not believe that relationships would last. And when I said that at a certain point in the beginning of the relationship, she got very upset. It's like, well, what are we doing with each other if you don't believe this will last? As it happened, with time, I did started to shift, and I reached a place where 5 years later I got engaged to her. I proposed to her and she accepted. And then about a year later, she broke up with me. And I remember it being one of the most painful experiences in my life. I literally felt I knelt on the floor, and it felt like it was the end of the world. And I was crying and feeling like this is such intense pain, and it felt like at the end of the world. And it was the end of a world. But at the same time, I felt this awakening of, I'm feeling all this pain and I'm still alive. And there was something actually very good about that, And now, years later, when I reflect on that experience, I think what it really helped me see, even though I wasn't conscious of it at the time, bear in mind, this is a person that I thought was great all along, and I still think of her as a great person. And despite the pain, I'm glad that at no point did that pain turn into bitterness and see her as a bad person or a villain or anything like that. I'm glad that never happened inside me, even though, like, when I came in contact with my aunt, and I talked about this before, and she called her a bitch, not in her face, but I was like, no, don't call her a bitch, because she's not. So, and I guess that's one of the things we do as human beings. When the pain becomes intolerable, we'll just blame the other person and make them, turn them into a villain. But I'm glad that didn't happen inside me. And when I look back at trauma now, You know, I mean, I was able to acknowledge to myself at the time that she literally needs a different person than me. I loved her enough to recognize that I'm a very chaotic person in general, especially back then, and I'm maybe just not the person for her. And I just felt if you love somebody, if you truly love somebody, then you have to honor what they need. And it was clear to me that I wasn't what she needed, you know, and she ended up marrying, you know, I ended up, we didn't have contact much for the next 25 years, but then I did. We just bumped into her and I ended up meeting her husband. And when we broke up, I actually, there was this guy, he was around her. We broke up a year before and there was this guy around her and I really didn't like him and he really pissed me off and I was jealous, and then we got back together. Nothing happened between of them, you know, that's what she said, and whatever, I'm not judging it. But the second time we broke up, there was a guy who was around, nothing happened with them. But I kind of, when we broke up, I actually felt it would actually be good for her to end up with him because he's more stable than I am. And bizarrely, 25 years later, I bumped into her and she says, look, I talk about you to my husband. We should go out and like all meet. And that was like 10 years ago. And today he's one of my best friends. He's such a beautiful person. It's very touching, actually, what a great guy he is and how giving he has been to me as well, you know. And now my current wife, we go to their house and I mean, look, it's a very rare, this is a very rare thing to happen in life in general. But for me, what's really important about all of this is that trauma isn't about the pain or how intense the pain is, it's the quality of the pain. There's a huge difference for me now, when I look back, about differentiating pain that has come from a person who disrespects me or wants to hurt me versus a pain where this is just life. You know, so that's a clear situation where there was no harm intended. And life isn't about getting everything that I want at that moment. You can have a lot of beauty coming out of pain if you're just hanging enough, if the pain is coming from a place that is clean, you know. There's another thing from that relationship which is worth sharing. Actually, no, I'll stop here for a second. I'll pause because even this is all actually very heavy. Despite it being very beautiful, it is still heavy, you know. And I would just want to honor it. Yeah, more than ever, it's very clear it's not about the pain or how intense the pain is. It's about where it's coming from. Some pain is just about life, and I don't want to ever get to a place where, well, my head does. My head wants to get to a place where it's like, life, don't give me any more pain. I've had enough, motherfuckers. But life has pain, you know. Anyway, I'll pause for now so I can process this. When I look at the... We're still rolling?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's another thing worth sharing, which is, I mean, for a person who's, you know, for a person like me who's had so much trauma to work through, one thing I've learned the hard way is that all of this work, the improvement isn't very linear. It's like any other skill, like with music or other learning, quite often the improvements are like in a burst and suddenly you feel like you're doing something which you were not able to do before. It's not like learning math in a program that is very gradual, 1 plus 1 equal 2. Well, 12 plus 12 is 24. I wasn't able to count less than 10, but now I can. And it's not a gradual learning process. Sometimes, it's not linear. There's a lot of things happening at the same time, and sometimes you get a lot of links, and suddenly you find yourself, you can not just walk, but run, So one of the things that I've noticed, which is worth sharing, is that in a relationship, especially when I did my counseling training course, and I started to feel I was part of this community and we were all into working ourselves, it disrupted the relationship at the time. So growth in a relationship disrupts the dynamics. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but in the initial stages, like in my case, I was dependent on my girlfriend at the time. I was like, oh my God, she is the source of light in the darkness, which was my life at the time. And suddenly when I was part of this tribe of counseling psychology, I was getting light from somewhere else as well. And so it disrupted the relationship for her. It was like, well, you don't seem to need me like you did before. And, it was end up like, and I had this sense that, well, I don't need anything. I'm doing well. But so in my head, I was like, well, I don't need you like I did before. But it was very tricky, and that's a delusional state as well, and I was still in my 20s, so it was a mature, I was still processing all of that stuff, and I wasn't being arrogant about it, but she could feel there's a shift, so me trying my best at that age to frame it was like, well, I don't need you like before, but you make my life more beautiful. I mean, that sounds okay to say it right now, but it's still, for her, I didn't need her like before, and it was disruptive. I don't have much more to say about it right now. All I'm naming is that shifts internally, especially that if it's related to an outside dynamic besides the relationship you're in, a positive shift can create a disruption. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it needs to be worked through. Yeah. So look, today I'm not going to name everything that I've worked through in relationships. I'm just going to leave it out there with you, and if you have more questions, I can maybe explore them in other videos, So that's one issue or one point. Okay, I'm gonna pause. Do you need to look at this? So there is another relationship that I look back at, and think of it as a very positive thing, and the person is a beautiful person, and we are still in each other's life, not very regularly, but there is something really, we did break up, obviously, but there is something really worth sharing with you about that breakup. And it relates to the history of trauma, to having a history of trauma. So at a certain point in a relationship, we were living together, and I started to work on a film documentary on Palestine. It's a project that was like 5 years in the making, but at a certain point, I was trying to select photos and decide what to put in the film. And I was looking at a lot of photos and being conscious I don't want to overwhelm the viewer. So I was trying to select photos that I was trying to balance out what to share with the viewer so that I don't overwhelm them, but at the same time pick photos that illustrate, give a sense of how difficult it is for the Palestinian people. And I was seeing basically a lot of photos of dead children. And it was so disturbing to go through this. And I was fucking with my head so much that I ended up quite often going to my bedroom, our bedroom, and closing the door. On a sensory level, I was just overwhelmed, and I was like doing this, you know. And my girlfriend at the time felt that she kept on saying to me, "You are falling out of love with me." And basically, I didn't have the words to explain to her what I didn't know was going on a sensory physical level, on a biological level. I was shutting down. On a biological level, my senses were overwhelmed. The reason I was closing the door wasn't to shut her out, but that's how she was experiencing it. That was not my intention, you know, but that's what I was doing. You know, I was closing the door. Physically I was shutting her out, but I wasn't I was trying to put myself in a space where I wanted to feel less senses from the world, whether it's light, whether it's sound, you know. And in terms of what she said, what she was saying, "You're falling out of love with me," and you know, I said it a few times. I said, "Look, I'm working on this film. It's very tough. Please don't make any decisions right now. Wait until the film is finished, and please don't make any decisions." But as it happened, we broke up, you know, and we finished the film. I finished the film, and then a year later we met. I don't remember how, and I was in a much better place, and my attraction, you know, and we ended up going out with each other again. And she moved back in, and she was like, "I didn't know you could fall back in love with me." My experiences of relationships is once you fall out of love, you don't fall back in love with again, you know. So and then we broke up a year later, and then we didn't talk to each other for a while, but then we did, and that was very healing. That was really great to talk again about at least a year later, and you know, I got to apologize. And she got to accept the apology, and she got to own her part in whatever the breakup was. And I guess the summary of it for today, at least, is that we human beings, well, at least myself, I'm constantly trying to work on my stuff and grow. And back then, all my intentions are as good as my intentions today in my current relationships, you know, and I just didn't have the words or the knowledge of how to deal with it at the time, and it broke up, you know. And today I'm in a relationship which I feel I'm very lucky to be with her, but never to take it for granted, and also be conscious of my limitations. You know, I'm grateful that we don't have huge challenges in our relationship today. We don't have any kids, and thank God we're not planning on having any kids, because that complicates life. But looking back at, you know, all I could do is my best at the time. You know, there's not, you know, and today it's not like there's ever gonna be a point of arrival, like this is the best of me and I'm great. That's not gonna be. I'm a human being, you know. I feel smaller now. Okay, I'm gonna take a breath and look at my notes and talk about my current relationship in a way that will make her fall in love with me more. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, you need to look at the camera. Too condensed? Am I too fast? Is it?
No. Too fast? No, you're not.
Does it feel like I'm rushing, trying to squeeze too much in?
No, but the subject itself has a lot of يعني it's beautiful and heavy, and as you said, no, it's I don't know.
Okay.
No, not you're not. You don't seem to
I'm
be
not rushing.
rushing.
Okay.
You seem to be just telling stories,
Okay,
and you
okay.
have a lot to say.
Okay. Keep on going.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about my current relationship. I'm married. Well, it's been, it's been 10 years. We've been together for 10 years, and we are married, I don't know, 7 years ago or something. And I'm very grateful to be in this relationship. There's a lot of good stuff that is worth sharing, but I'm conscious of not trying to squeeze too much in. So I might do another video at some other time. I'll invite you questions from you. But for now, here's a few things. Here's a few things worth sharing. One is that when I met her in Lebanon, I was going through a horrendous divorce in Ireland. It's a divorce that lasted, I don't know, it took 13 years to get that divorce or something. I don't know, man. But it was such a fucked up process. And so when I first met her, I immediately recognized this is a beautiful person. There were no games played, because I was trying to get advice. I was living in Barcelona before that, and some really well-meaning friends says like, oh, you have to play the chasing game in the beginning, and even for a joke, I was getting lessons from this guy who was very flirty with women, and we had this joke where he was going to teach me how to lure women all of the sudden. Anyway, that's not my style, never worked. But like I've had advice, like, play games in the beginning, and I don't want to play games, and I was even walking with a couple who were married, were they married at the time? Yeah, they were married. No, they weren't married at the time, but they were, look, I was hanging out with this couple, and she told me in front of her partner, yeah, I played games with him for the first 6 months, and he was like, yeah, she did. As if like this is natural part of life. And I think it is natural for a lot of people. But anyway, so there were no games played by either of us. And I just felt she's such a beautiful person that I felt that the gods were having mercy on me for bringing her into my life. It felt like at that level, like that life has changed. It wasn't about getting, I really felt that I was going to be good with her. I recognized that, but despite recognizing it on a heart level, or maybe on a spirit level, on a head level, because of all fucked up experiences in my life, not just with the divorce, but in general, and if you think back to that other relationship where, I didn't trust we're going to be with each other forever, and then I trusted it, and then she broke it off with me, and despite me seeing her as a good person, all of that, there's like all of these inner relationship to life in general, not just about women. It's like, fuck your life, what shit you're gonna throw at me that way? So on a heart level, it felt like the gods were giving me something so beautiful finally. But there was another part of me was like, well, maybe the gods are fucking with you. Maybe they're giving you something so beautiful to see how you're going to fuck it up, because you're not used to it. you know, and so I've had all this shit going on internally. My heart feels this is a beautiful person, you should trust her. And I've got all these fucking demons on the inside saying, don't trust her. So what do I do with this shit? You know? So I started to joke with her. Every day I would ask her, are you a psycho? And she would just smile and say, I'm not a psycho. And after 2 months of this, she was just like, well, maybe you should wait and see. But what I was doing there is, instead of, okay, so my heart was trusting her, but there was that part which also wasn't trusting life in general. And there was like this turmoil internally. And instead of letting it fester internally, I was putting it out and joking about it. And that was great. I'm so glad I was able to do that, because it diffused the tension internally. And then we could joke about me not trusting her. And then she could joke back with me about whether I should trust her or not. Because when I finally got that divorce, I proposed to her immediately. And she was like, whoa, you just finished from that divorce. Are you really sure we should be getting married now? And by then I was sure, but then I was like, well, so by then I was like, fuck it. She's such a beautiful person. I don't give a shit. I'm not gonna learn to not trust my heart again. You know, I've trusted a couple of women and it was not well-placed trust, and I got very badly stabbed with some really beautiful designed knives. But I survived, and I wanted to like not give up on love and on the heart, you know. But even she was like, I'm not sure it's good for us to get married that quick. And I was like, but anyway, look, so I guess that's all about trust and not trust and how much to trust. And look, none of this, I don't have anything wisdom, and I don't have any like wisdom that I can impart of you. Well, here's what I learned from this, and maybe you could learn this from me. No, this shit is fucking personal, man. You know, I'm not going to encourage anybody to do nothing, you know. And if there's any spirits out there who are considering, you know, reincarnation and coming back to Earth, I'm not encouraging shit. You know, I literally do not feel I've got my shit together or ever gonna get my shit together as a human being, because this existence still doesn't make sense to me. But fuck it, I'm here and I'm trying to make the best out of it. I wonder what my wife would say watching this. Actually, okay, look. So, here's something worth sharing, in that with my wife today, I'm being so careful, I'm not even giving her a name. I'm really lost about how to approach this. But anyway, look, one of the things that is worth mentioning is that there's a huge imbalance in our histories, in the sense that I am Mr. Trauma. I've got such fucked up, intense traumas in my history. And when we first met, excuse me about the cough, and when we first met, I was going, you know, like the first 3 weeks, I was so happy, and then there was a shift in the court case, and I plummeted really badly. But anyway, look, the point is that I've had a very rich history with trauma, and hers isn't that traumatized, and she was in a good place when we first met. So there was a very big imbalance between the two. And this is how it manifested. It manifested in the sense that when we did have a couple of bit of tension in the beginning, and generally, this is a unique thinking back on it. She is a uniquely gentle person. Like, she's not into drama. She's, anyway. The point is that when we first met, she said, there is no room to argue with you because you are under so much stress. And that was great that she pointed that out. She pointed to an imbalance in the relationship. And that's how it was for a long time, because the court case just got more fucked up. And it was affecting my relationship with my daughter. But here's a promise I made to myself, which is that eventually when life calms down and I start doing better as a human being, and that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. It took a long time, at least 5 years, 7 years, 8. Maybe 8 years. 8 out of the 10 years, it was far more imbalanced that I was taking a lot of the energy, and she was generally she's a very smiley person, and she doesn't have that many off days. Like, she has maybe 3 days a month where she's off and is not smiling much. And even there internally, I'm like almost, for a while I was like sulking internally. And it was like I had to have a good talk with myself, snap out of it, fucker. What do you want? Perfection? Anyway, the promise I made to myself is that when I will get better eventually, that I want to make sure that I stop pulling back from the support and ask for less. Like, talk less about myself. I was working through a therapist through the whole thing. But the point is, it recognized that when you have a lot of trauma, far more trauma than the other person, it was natural that one person is taking more of the energy than the other. In this case, it was me. And for me to honor it with time and do something about it. And I'm glad to say that I have stuck to that. And I do the dishes more now. And I clean the kitchen more because I like chaos. And she's been naming it and saying it, So look, I'm actually naming something in the last 5 minutes that actually took years to put into practice. So this area is complex. I don't have anything to say that will immediately help another person. Because all of these insights, I'm generally a well-meaning person who likes to be loving and likes to be loved back. Pretty simple. And I am with a person who is also pretty simple in her needs, we just enjoy being loving and giving to each other, literally that simple, but it doesn't pan out that way because life, being an adult and having adult responsibility, it gets complex, so I think that's the main point about relationships in general, even in the most well-meaning relationship. It's all about the daily because look, in terms of how should we human beings in general treat each other, well, you've got a few psychopaths who would always try to create wars and be top of the ladder and fuck each other up, but I think most people generally want to treat each other well. And that's what generally religion is about. It's like, well, love one another. Well, the principle is so simple. Love one another, treat each other well. But the application of it is fucking difficult, So, and more so than ever in an intimate relationship, and it's more about the daily practice of being aware of how I'm influencing the other person, reflect on my actions, make sure I'm fair, make sure I'm being loving, and also make sure that what my needs are, like, am I being over loving as a compensation for some of my own shit and that fucks up the dynamic in a certain way? You know, there are no simple answers to any of this. There aren't. You know, I'm gonna take a break, cough, and look at my notes. There's three. I mean, I just realized, like, I have tons of notes here, and I don't want to exhaust myself or exhaust you, especially because I want to cover another area as well today. So I'm going to name three important insights or developments, and maybe expand on them later if they sound interesting to you. The first one is an incident that happened about 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, I don't know, man. But I went with my wife to the airport, and after checking in and everything, we went to this cafe, and she says, we have plenty of time. I said, oh, great, we get to spend time with each other. And she says, oh, I thought recently you can't stand me. And I said, what? She says, yeah, recently I feel like you can't stand me. And now, God bless her, she wasn't saying it in any accusatory way, which left me in a space of not being defensive. Now thinking back, I was like, wow, I'm so grateful the way she said it. Because she said it in an accusatory way, and I was like, well, what do you mean? I mean, hopefully I don't talk that way. No, I don't talk that way. Anyway, look, I could be an idiot. Because by design, I'm a human. And I'm a guy as well, you know. The point is that she said it in a non-accusatory way, and I was able to say, okay, here's the best thing about that incident. The best thing about that incident is that I was able to explain that her impression of me towards her was not how it was for me at all. I was like, because of the way she said it, I got a chance to say to her, no, not at all. It's just that I can't live with I'm not doing very well with myself. So I'm the one who can't stand myself very well these days. And that's the vibe that you're picking up. Now, again, thank God I didn't stop there, because had I stopped there, it's like saying, well, it's your responsibility to deal with how I am and put up with me. And I got a chance to reflect on how I was with her, and thank God my life wasn't as complicated as the previous relationship when I was doing this documentary on Palestine, where I was totally shut down. But I got a chance to learn from that over time, and had an opportunity later not to fuck up the new relationship. And I was also lucky to be working with a therapist who was having me pay attention to my biology and how I'm thinking of myself not in terms of just psyche and trauma, but purely as an animal. When you're stressed, your chemistry changes, and you start reacting to the world as if you want to shut down for it. And in that heightened state of awareness, which means that suddenly in that state of stress, sounds on a physical level becomes amplified, which means if my wife is eating an apple, and God bless her, she's a very gentle, feminine woman, and when she eats an apple, when I'm very stressed, I'm hearing it as and it's literally my senses. And by then, thank fuck, I had enough education and enough awareness, enough practice to deal with my own physical reaction, because my own physical reaction was reacting as if she is the fucking enemy and she is trying to kill me with that fucking sound. I had enough awareness to be disturbed by it and internally not to start reacting to her as if she needs to not eat the apple. But she is sensitive enough to was like, what's wrong, Sami? When she bites the apple, I'm going like this, you know? And then I explain all of this biology, and then she was like, from a beautiful place, she said, oh, do you want me to get up and go? Do you want me to stop eating the apple? And then it was like, no, I don't want you to be walking on eggshells around me, you know? And then it was like, she's like, well, you're in that state. I don't want to like eat an apple and you start going like this. But anyway, look, with time, we negotiated all of that stuff. We were able to talk openly about it. And most of the time, I don't want her to walk on eggshells around me. And most of the time, I don't want her to stop eating the apple. And I also don't want to get up because she's eating the apple. So all was the apple, man. Women eating the apple, and that's how, you know, and that's how we blame women for all our fucking problems. I'm just thinking, because Lara here yesterday, Lara is like doing the photography. She is, and she was eating an apple yesterday. We talked about this stuff. We were laughing how men have blamed women for eating the apple, and that's how creation got fucked up in the first place. Ah! Anyway, for the sake of right now, we were all able to negotiate all of that stuff with time. I had two other areas I wanted to talk about, and I'm fucking exhausted now. But I'll just name them quickly. Fuck, they are heavy actually. Okay, never mind. I'll just name them. The first one is... Actually, you know what? I'll pause it for just a second. Maybe we don't need to pause it. Look, instead of me worrying about you, the viewer, if this shit is heavy, just fucking pause it, man. You know, like you're watching this shit on YouTube, just pause it. You know, this is heavy, actually. And if there's any merit in what I'm sharing, is actually for you to reflect about your own life, and it was like, does this happen with me or not? So don't mind me, man. You know, if I'm too fucking intense or whatever, fucking pause, shut me up. I want to shut up. So look, I'm just going to name one area quickly, and it's the following. And this has come up throughout most of my relationship, which is how, when a partner is living with me and I'm dealing with a lot of shit, and then I bump into a friend or a friend goes over and I'm all cheered up. And it's like, then she's reacting, well, how come I can't cheer you up like them? It probably needs another video, but my answer then and now is that my partner in a safe relationship, after time, is like living with myself, which means she's part of me. So when something new comes up, the nervous system itself is gonna be like, like a doggy who's got a new bone. But with the old bone, oh fuck, man, what am I going with this shit? That doesn't sound very good. Old bone and new bone. Okay, look, for the time being, okay, I'll try to I invite you to come up with better words than how I'm dealing with this now. but it's a phenomenon that happens in relationships. In a safe relationship, in a safe, healthy relationship, if a person has got fucked up traumas like me, it's common that when a friend comes over, you light up. So I don't have a quick answer, although I'm trying to summarize it to saying that it's part of biology. When something not part of the daily life happens, that my tail as a dog starts flickering more because it's something new and it's gonna, friend calls over for a short time, I'm gonna be excited. Aha! Now, so if I was living with that friend all the time, that won't happen. Look, you find the best way to deal with this phenomena with your partner. There. I'm holding you responsible for your own stuff, and I'll just keep on working on my own shit about this. How bad is that, Lara?
It's actually genuine and no.
There, now I roped Lara into colluding with not a great answer. Okay, look, I actually don't have great answers about any of this, and I shouldn't try to put myself in a situation where I'm trying to solve everything for you. There, and you didn't even ask me, you don't even know me, I don't even know you. No, so look, there is a temptation for me to try to give you the best of what I've learned, but some stuff is, I can just notice the phenomena, and that's one of the things that do happen. So just keep it open and try to explain the best way I can. Yeah. So one more area, and I think this also deserves more time than I'm going to give it now, but I'm going to name it for the time being. So in a relationship where you have one person who's got a lot of fucked up trauma to deal with, and you're with a partner who is generally far more smiling than I am. I mean, socially I smile, man, but I spend a lot of time on my own. I don't go out that much. But anyway, look. I think of my partner as having a beautiful smile, that I am so grateful that this is how it is. And I'm so lucky that I am with a person who tends to smile 27 days out of each month, And sometimes I feel that I am not living up to that beautiful smile, meaning there's a sense of shame that I am getting a lot of beauty from her and she's not getting the best out of me. I'm imagining one day I'm gonna be freer, and I have wings and I'll be flying all over the fucking place and I'm being an angelic creature on this earth. Okay, I can imagine that. Look, I'm improving it in general anyway, but I can imagine a day where I will be a better version of today or doing much better than today, and I'll be able to reciprocate her beautiful smile more. And today I'm generally doing much better, but for the most of our relationship, the first 8 years, I felt a sense of shame, a sense of, I'm not the man that I want to be, and she deserves better. Now I do make her laugh, and I can laugh through pain most of the time. But that sense of she deserves better, I'm less of a man because of my fucking traumas. Or one day I fucking put it out to her, and she was like, Sami, I'm choosing you. That's not for you to worry about. And man, that's some beautiful shit she said to her just there. She's like, don't worry about it, that's my responsibility. And that's like, initially it was like, whoa, that's a lot of love. And nearly sent me into another shame spiral. So look, shame, I think, is a deeply wiring into us that can end up creating poison. And that's something for me to be aware of. Yeah, I can probably talk for an hour about this stuff. Do you really want an hour of this stuff? Anyway, look, I'm gonna pause here, and that's enough for relationships for today. Um, if there's a summary, it's about being grateful for what I have, trying to act from that place of gratitude on a daily level, do the best I can every day, notice all the messed up the dynamics that can arise, like shame, like on zillions of other stuff that we human beings ended up falling for. Not to take anything for granted. You know, I'm conscious, had we met 30 years ago, it might not have worked out because we were different people back then. You know, and never to take it for granted that this is so, there's so much love and goodness here that it will last forever. No, you know, I'm capable of refined, fucked up shit, you know, and just try to be as present, as loving as I can, and revise, be aware, and trust. And okay, I'm gonna just shut up now. It already sounds like fucking work, and saying shit like, and let go. Okay, look, I'm gonna just stop. It's bigger than me, really. Okay, let's take a break.